Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mariah from TechServe Alliance. Welcome to today's webinar, The State of the IT Workforce Post-COVID-19, a candid conversation with CIOs and IT staffing leaders, jointly presented by SIM and TechServe Alliance. There will be a question and answer session after the presentation, so feel free to write in any questions you want answered in the question box on the right side of your screen. We are also recording today's presentation, which will be available after the webinar on our website and will be sent out in follow-up emails. I'd like to introduce Mark Roberts, CEO of TechServe Alliance.
Great, thank you, Mariah. Welcome, everyone. We're really excited about today's event. It's the first virtual event jointly hosted by TechServe Alliance and SIM. And we have just a phenomenal panel lineup today. And I just want to just let everyone know that we really do view this as a conversation, not only among the panelists, but also with the audience. So if at any point you have a question, we're actually going to attempt to take some questions as we go through the presentation and the discussion. So, and then we'll also save some time at the end for questions as well. So as we go through the discussion, feel free to post a question. And we're very excited that you're able to join us. With that, I would like to introduce Mark Taylor, CEO of SIM. Mark?
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to connect with the TechServe Alliance community. Mark and I met about a year ago, thanks to Andrew Jackson, who connected us. Andrew's been a long-term member of the SIM community, and to say that is a member is an understatement. Andrew has really been one of our really impactful leaders. Andrew, thank you for all the investment that you've made in our community, and I know that you're on the board of TechServe Alliance today, and so thank you for helping bringing these two communities together. And Mark, thank you for hosting. We've got with us also today Steve Heilenman and Caren Shiozaki, who are from the SIM board, and we're going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves here in a moment, along with Sue Thaden. Sue, you're part of the Tech Alliance community. Why don't you start with a quick introduction, and we'll say hello to the rest of the gang too.
Sounds great, Mark, thanks. So I'm Sue Thaden. I'm the CEO of CRi. We are an IT staffing firm based in Nebraska. We also have a solutions division focused significantly on emerging technology, mobile, UXD, and analytics. I've been part of TechServe for 18 years, maybe. I've known Mark and Susan a long time, love this group, and love to do anything we can to support the community and be part of the community. So thanks for including us. I chair government affairs for TechServe Alliance, served on the board years ago, and I'm happy to be here today. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Sue. Caren, quick introduction.
Sure. I'm Caren Shiozaki. I'm CIO at TMST Inc. It's a boutique mortgage company based in Santa Fe, New Mexico. We've only ever deal with jumbos and super jumbos. We don't deal with conventional loans. I am chair emeritus of the SIM National Board, and I am a fellow of the Dallas-Fort Worth chapter and a member of the Arizona chapter. I have a professional certification in corporate governance, and I'm also a certified e-discovery specialist.
Caren, thanks for making time and joining the conversation today. All right, Steve, quick introduction.
Hi there, everybody. Excited to be here. I'm Steve Heilenman. I'm the CIO of Computer Aid. It's a privately held IT services and products company based out of Allentown, but we're global. Allentown, Pennsylvania, that is. We're global, about 4,000 people, a little under 900 million in revenue. Also have two facilities offshore, both in Bangalore, India, and the Philippines, Manila, Philippines. Longtime SIM member, part of the current national board on the finance committee, and also the former president of the Philadelphia chapter. Once again, I'm very excited to be here and be part of this panel.
Thank you, Steve. Really appreciate you making the time. I think you bring some unique perspective to the conversation today. Andrew Jackson, I spoke to you a moment ago. We'll give you a moment to introduce yourself before we really dive into the meat of the conversation.
Sure, I'm looking forward to it. Andrew Jackson, I've been in staffing business for 40 years now. Started my own company in 1996, and we've worked in about 13 different states right now, and been a longtime member of SIM, as you mentioned. I helped co-chaired the national conference for 7 years, and most recently helped start 10 new SIM chapters in the last couple of years. And I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Thank you for bringing your perspective and all your energy and investment into both these communities. Well, Mark, you guys have at TechServe Alliance have been gathering some really fascinating data that you've shared with us. Let's jump right into that, talk about the data, and then we'll get the conversation rolling.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Mark. So if you advance the next slide. So what we thought we would do is to kind of frame up the discussion with some data in terms of what's happening in the employment landscape.
You ready for the next slide?
Yep, there's a little delay.
There we go.
So for over 15 years, we've been producing the IT Employment Index. What this does is it captures IT employment across the country on a monthly basis, and we report it out regularly. We're picked up in major publications. And this is actually just a snapshot of the last 5 years. If you could advance. And what's really interesting, and this sort of starts in May 2015, and we just reported on May 2020 results. It's derived from BLS data run through a TechServe Alliance algorithm. As many of you know, for a number of years, if you could advance, next, we've really been in a period of no growth in actually IT employment. And that was really a supply-driven phenomenon. And of course, that changed dramatically. In April, we really saw the impact of it. If you could advance. IT employment overall was down 0.88%. And then in May, we saw even a more precipitous decline, 1.63%. So IT employment currently standing about 5.2 million nationally. And so while certainly a downturn and certainly a significant month-over-month downturn, when we compare it to what's happening in the overall employment market, it looks quite different. You advance the next slide. Advance again, please. So here again is our, this is a year-over-year change for actually the last 20 years. And we see, the growth, the various declines through a couple of different recessions, and where IT employment stands at 5.2 million. But when we actually take a look on the right axis, you see the numbers for the overall workforce. It looks much, much more dire. Advance. It's actually down almost 12%. And this really doesn't take into account Bureau of Labor Statistics, from which this data is derived, actually had some counting challenges with COVID. And so as a consequence, they've even admitted that they're probably undercounting the contraction of the workforce. And we see that dramatically just sort of on the following slide. You have in April, again, negative 0.86% decline and negative 13.35% decline. So really, while IT certainly has turned down, particularly in hard-hit sectors, we see it as quite a bit more resilient than the overall workforce.
Boy, I will tell you, Mark, that a lot of what I've heard just from anecdotally from our community is while we've certainly seen layoffs and such that and furloughs that are reflected in this that little tail right on the end there. What we have seen is that to a great degree, IT has become elevated, if you will. It's become the critical component, and more CIOs are spending more times in front of boards in the last 90 days than they had in the previous year. And so while we're certainly seeing that little bit of a tail, it's been balanced, if you will, with an elevation of the overall demand. And it certainly makes sense as we've all gone remote. Suddenly, everyone is literally dependent upon this group executing across the board. But I've also heard from those that are in the entertainment, travel industry, et cetera, some of those that have been obviously just been shut down have taken much harder hits, and including on the IT side as well. I'm wondering about the shuffling. Is it, are we seeing something here that's going to be a longer term trend, or I mean, are we going to see something that's going to ramp back up more quickly? I'd be interested to see, like with Steve and Caren, what they're seeing from their perspectives around that dip. Is it reflected in their industry, and more specifically, are they seeing an increase or a continuation of that? Steve, I'd be curious about your thoughts around it.
Sure. Yeah, we've seen a little bit of a dip. Some of that was just some rebalancing. Looking at some of these trends, I think without knowing some of the detail on the specific job roles, we've seen a reduction in areas like level 1, level 2 support, where you're dealing with a lot of service desk type situations, infrastructure as applications have moved to the cloud. It's refocusing on other areas of IT, so we have a little bit of that. But in general, we've been holding strong overall as a corporation. What we found is even a little bit of uptick starting this month with companies looking at starting to get back rather than bring back employees or hiring full-time employees. They're looking at contractors, consultants as a way of supplementing that to give them some flexibility and without knowing the exact what's future with what's going to happen in the near term. So I think in general, IT itself has really held itself pretty strong over this pandemic.
That's interesting that people are taking are bringing force back in a more flexible structure as opposed to going right back to filling in with full-time commitments. Shows a little bit of trepidation, but at the same time back with some real energy. Mark, I know I interrupted your thoughts there. Was it something that you want to add on to this before we moved on to Caren's input?
No, I think very very good to hear in terms of what Steve is seeing in the marketplace. And then I'll share some information on another key trend regarding immigration after Caren weighs in.
You bet. Caren, what are you seeing and what are you hearing as you're listening around within your company and around the industry?
No, actually, I would agree with Steve that we really haven't seen that much of a dip. I mean, financial services, in particular retail banking, has probably been pretty slammed because when the CARES Act came out, they were flooded with all those PPP loans that had to be processed. From a just general IT perspective, for me, I know we had a few open positions for specialists, network and security specialists that had been kind of hard to find, and as other places might be furloughing, we're being able to pick up contractors and on a temporary basis, because we also do not know what is going to happen like 6-9 months down the road.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of waiting to see, aren't we? But I'm glad to at least see there's a little bit of advancement, a little bit of optimism, maybe even that fact that if you will, even contractors are being added. So Sue and Andrew, you guys are
Mark,
seeing
I was going to say, Sue and I've definitely got a view across the board, a lot of different customers that we work with, and from Fortune 50 to smaller businesses. And what I'm seeing, and I'll shut up so Sue can expand as well, but there are certain industries that definitely were hit a lot harder. Oil and gas was having problems coming into this, and so that's been slow. As you know, retail, transportation, hospitality have all been hit pretty hard. On the other side, like Caren said, financial services, banking, they've seen no hurt, actually an uptick with some of our TechServe members. I wear my TechServe hat now because I'm also on the board there. Healthcare was something that came in kind of hot, but then got a little slower because all the elective surgeries shut down, and so now that's picking back up. But consumer goods, construction, there's a lot of other industries that didn't see the downturn. And one last point before I give it up to Sue, what we're seeing now as people start to come back is that people that were let go at the beginning part of this dip on the charts that Mark Roberts is showing, they've taken jobs elsewhere. So sometimes people are asking people, hey, I would like to bring them back. They've already found another job. As you mentioned, Mark, the deck has been shuffled, and people have left, and maybe they switch industries in other areas. I wanted to let Sue expand too.
Well, I want to, and Sue, I'd like you to jump on. There's two dynamics I think that could be interesting here for us. One is, and Andrew inferred there is the difference between, let's just say, larger billion up companies in revenue and those that are in the mid market of say 10 million to a billion. Are you seeing any differentiation between their responses in this space? I mean, I have what I believe to be might be the case, but I'd be curious if you're seeing any real difference between how the different segments of the market are responding.
Is that one for me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So if I seen any difference in a small client versus a large client, maybe a 4,500, I think that I would say early on, I loved hearing what everybody else had to say, but that early on dip, the large clients were very focused on safe workforce. They're very focused on taking care of their people, getting them exited, figuring out how to get them set up. You know, we've been following the tagline of safe, engaged, productive. That's what we want everybody to be. And so that makes for good people, happy people, engaged people, getting stuff done and feeling good at the end of the day. So the big employers, I think that they had more distraction than the littles. A lot of littles, it was kind of like, quick, go home, we're set up, let's go. And the big ones now are dealing with the go back of elevators, hallways, mass quantities of people, bathrooms that aren't touchless, and all these things that we've never thought about, which are opportunities for some industry, which will be fun to see who wins out of all of that race. So that distraction is definitely greater in the larger organizations. They have so much more to tackle, so much more regulatory things to worry about than the smaller clients of ours. But as far as like the volume, maybe just to touch on what these guys are saying, I don't want to repeat. I want to be sensitive to the high value for everybody listening. We did see a little dip. I'm really curious, like everybody else, to sit here a year from now and look back at the trend that we're going to live through. I really think that dip was distraction, safety, pullback, fear, and now we're all bubbling out of it. We're seeing tremendous uptick in activity, like Caren and Steve said, in the last 14 to 30 days.
You know, so there's another dimension that of geographic dispersion. Clearly, I live in Austin, Texas, right? And those of us in Texas didn't experience what those in the Northeast corridor did, and particularly centered around New York. Just the magnitude of the impact of COVID on the medical system and its reach, right? The intensity of it, very different in experience. And I would be very curious, and this might be a question out to our larger audience, since we have a spectrum, is what are you guys seeing as you look across the spectrum of the geography from coast to coast? What differences are you seeing? What kind of bounce back are we seeing in the Northeast versus the Southeast and the Pacific Northwest, et cetera? I'd be very curious if any of you guys have perspective on that, and certainly our larger audience that's attending would be really interested to see if there's any questions or commentary around that space.
So Mark, I'll add a little bit. We do have offices around the globe. We've actually been impacted with some of our offshore, both in Manila as well in Bangalore. Manila is probably about a month ahead of where we are. So we are in the process of bringing some folks back. India is probably similar to us. But then even domestically, with all the different states, even within cities, it's varying. And obviously we have our own corporate structure and staff and support, but then all of our clients, each one's being different approaches. It's a very, very complex situation and trying to manage around that. But it's been quite a challenge, but I think it's been most companies have been very supportive of all of this. So,
you know, from our retail customers, about a month into the quarantine, they weren't sure how long that was going to last, and it was a financial decision. They needed to cut costs and it was across the board employees. IT got hit just like everybody else. They just didn't know how long this was going to go. Now we're seeing, hey, things are reopening. So the IT projects were there. It was just a matter of they weren't sure how they had to conserve cash. That was a big factor, especially in retail.
You know what? And thanks, Andrew. We had a good question come in from Jeff McLaughlin. He said, what type of IT roles, such as networking and security, are you seeing the greater need as companies begin to open up? Is it different than what was there previously, or is it very similar to what you were seeing in the pre-COVID and post-COVID type environment? Where's the biggest demand from a skill set standpoint?
I'll jump in and kind
Yeah,
of
Sue, please.
low key if it's on. So, you know, at the beginning, you heard a lot of help desks, network, get people the things the skill sets you needed to rapidly deploy 1,000 people to a work from home, work remote situation. So we heard a lot about that at first. And currently, I actually met with our managing director yesterday in preparation for this, and we went through requirements and clients and contracts, and it actually doesn't look that different for us today as it did pre-COVID. At the beginning it did, today it doesn't, from a skill set demand perspective. The mix of skill set demand.
Right. So very similar then from your perspective, Sue.
Also, Mark, I kind of I want to hear what the other Mark has to say too about the whole immigration issue, because that's going to be a huge dynamic going forward.
Yeah, we're going to jump into that question, jump into that category next. Hey, we've got a couple of more questions that have popped up right here, Mark, before we leave this subject, if I may.
Sure.
John Boone has asked, does IT employment in the graphs that you were showing a moment ago include product engineering, such as software engineers and at software companies?
Yeah, so it's derived from Bureau of Labor Statistics. We actually also put out an engineering index, so this would include, IT and computer-related engineering, and then our engineering index would cover the broader spectrum.
All right, great. Hey, we got a little input here from Thomas Anderson, who's out of the Boston area and Providence. A little commentary about the geographic spread question we had a moment ago. He says, we're a SIM Boston member and part of the Providence, Rhode Island Practitioner Roundtable, so they're in the Providence area. As an IT and digital talent solutions provider, staffing and recruiting, we saw no downturn in our engagement of hourly consultants. Being located in Rhode Island and buffered by New York and Massachusetts, we have seen COVID slow down some levels of hiring. Anyway, so actually from an hourly level, they saw no impact. Maybe a little bit more slowdown in the full time. So Thomas, thank you for sharing that perspective. Got one more question on this subject before we Mark, before we move on to the other area around the H-1B stuff. Eric Gorham from St. Louis said, what about the impact on government sector? Tax revenues are down, ticket revenues, etc. How is it impacting that sector and IT employment, particularly those that are providing services to government entities that are now seeing impacts from tax revenue decrease?
Yeah, and maybe I could jump in and then see if any of our other panelists have experience. So we actually do capture some subsets, and we did see a tick down in state and local government. I think you do have to separate out federal government, which virtually, as we've seen, has unlimited spending authority, and state and local governments, which typically have to balance their budgets. So we have seen some downturn, but I think what a lot of folks are waiting for is the impact if there is not federal relief for a lot of state and local jurisdictions. And so I think we've yet to see the full impact of on state and local. If there is not federal relief, there will be very, very significant decline in all employment within state and local, including IT.
Yeah, Mark, I think you're spot on. I feel the same way right now. They're just pulling in from, what funds they have, and are waiting to see what recovery they're going to get. And at that point, I think you're going to start to see some, depending on what kind of support they get, there's a potential large impact to that area.
Go ahead, Caren.
I was in an informal advisory group that stayed in New Mexico, and they've put their what I call strategics on hold for the time being. I know our legislature is getting ready to do a special session because now they're starting to do like nuclear winter planning.
Yeah. Well, I think the impact's going to be larger. I know in Texas we are, our drivers for revenue, our tax revenue are multiple, but of course oil and gas provides a lot of that, and production has dropped dramatically, coming out of West Texas. So I think we'll be dealing with sort of a double whammy in that regard. I know our friends in Houston have all felt the impact enormously across the entire city's economy, and that reflects, kind of that center hub of the energy sector.
I may make a
Eric, thanks for your question. Go ahead.
Oh, I might make a quick comment near the government sector. So we have a company that does mobile game day marketing and communication platforms for collegiate athletics and the NCAA championships. And it's just been unbelievable, the hit that these colleges, from an 800 student NAIA college to we work with Ohio State, beautiful, huge college. The hits they've taken from tickets, sponsorship, TV rights, contracts is pretty significant. And if that now in the fall they have video conferencing versus on campus, the enrollment and tuition dollars will take a hit. And those are a kind of a subset of the government spending. There's a lot of things that can impact as a result of our colleges not having the funding that they need to do the things they need, put out the students that we need. So we've just seen a major impact in that college and college athletics arena that hopefully comes back in August if we can get some people back to games and get games taking place again.
You know, Sue, I think you've hit on something actually that's going to be profound. When we think of industry disruptors, this certainly has, in this event, this experience has disrupted anyone who is dependent upon large gatherings. Even those of us in the association business, you know, have been directly impacted, and I suspect it will continue. For those universities, the fact that they have now recognized how effective they can be by not having students come to campus, I think there's a long tail to that. I think it's going to stick around, and those that I'm speaking to in the university space, you know, are thinking, we don't even know how this is going to affect us, but the sense is it's going to be a long-term impact. But as for college football, we love it so much. You know?
It's a religion where you are, Mark.
That's right. All I can say is Giga Maggies, go Jimbo. All right. Mark, I know we've been on this subject. I think we're probably ready to move on. Eric, thanks for the question.
Yeah.
I think we're ready to move on to the next segment of data.
Yeah, sure. No, great discussion. If you could advance the slide. So what I also wanted to share with folks, we do focus on government affairs. Sue mentioned she's the chair of our government affairs committee, and we track issues that impact IT staffing overall. And there are just a couple of things that I wanted to discuss, because I think it's an overlay in terms of this workforce supply demand balance. So many folks may know it's been sort of long-standing that the current administration put in what they call the Buy American, Hire American executive order. And it dealt also with trade, but as it relates to immigration, it basically asks all of the agencies to review their rules, their regulations, their guidance, and suggest reforms in their in sort of their language to really protect American workers. That's how they would phrase it and would reference it. If you can advance the next slide. So those efforts have really resulted in a dramatic increase of denials and RFEs. For those that are not immersed in the immigration world, that's request for evidence. That's when USCIS comes back and asks for a whole host of additional information. There have been more revocations and certainly greater uncertainty. So this really shows the impact of sort of the administration's position. So in FY 2015, the denial rate for new H-1B petitions was 6%. This current fiscal year, where we're more than midway through, it sits at 30%, and that's across all sectors.
That's an enormous increase. Kind of hard to take that in. That's a massive impact.
It is a very, very significant impact, and on a number of levels. It's impacted obviously clients, IT staffing firms, and the consultants. There's been a clear message of sort of a more restrictive immigration posture by this administration compared to prior administrations. And I thought it would be also helpful to share some things that are coming down the pike. Some of these will only be proposals and will take time to be implemented, but others are more imminent and can be implemented unilaterally. And the first one is there is likely going to be a proposed temporary entry ban on non-immigrant visa categories, including H-1Bs and L-1s. I don't think they've landed on the exact length of time, but 120 days is sort of the general range they've been discussing. They have also proposed, and these would likely require more formal rulemaking, what we call notice and comment rulemaking, but significantly increasing the fees for H-1Bs. Redefining the term specialty occupation. So computer occupations have traditionally almost automatically been treated as a specialty occupation, but they're going to potentially redefine those. Increasing wage levels, in some cases very significantly. And then, of course, an issue that's been talked about for a long time, but I think they're going to finally look to move forward with it, is an effort to eliminate the H-4 dependent spouse's work authorization. And then finally, rescinding STEM OPT. So those are just a number of the things that the administration is likely to announce in the coming weeks. And I thought I'd just share that with you, that we are likely, and it's being done against the backdrop of COVID. If you were to ask for their explanation, they have been seeking to restrict immigration all along, and they now see the increased urgency and a basis on which to argue for some of these things in light of COVID and the impact on employment. So these are things we will be definitely watching, and suggest if you are dependent upon the assistance of foreign nationals, you be aware of these. And even if you don't actually use those individuals yourself, be aware that if you operate within those skill sets, it will impact you, even if you are not someone who sponsors H-1B candidates.
Mark, there's a question that Joseph, and I'm going to butcher his last name, Yeslulatis. We're just going to call him Joseph. And it goes, do you have denial stats or renewal H-1Bs?
I think I've seen them. I don't. They're not part of the presentation. But certainly we can follow up on that. I think there are some statistics out there on renewals.
Can I ask a
Sue,
quick question?
yeah, Sue, jump in.
Mark Roberts, bear with me. Petition, the word petition, $20,000 fee in all H-1B petitions. What is petition? Is that extension, transfer, brand new, all the above?
Yeah, we haven't seen the actual proposal, so this is just, so we don't know the exact contours of it. I think there will be challenges to all of these proposals as to whether it's allowed and authorized by the enacting statute. So it remains to be seen. So I don't know the answer to that yet, how broad that will be.
Do you think potentially, I'm going backward up, sorry, Andrew, the temporary entry ban. So we've seen that 30% is of no surprise to us. We're eating, sleeping, breathing the challenges that are occurring. It's really unfortunate. So that temporary ban, do you think we have some people stuck in India due to they were home and COVID travel got shut down? This will impact them even being able to return on an active visa possibly?
Yeah, very much so. As a matter of fact, we just sent out an alert to the membership yesterday that anyone who's abroad or potentially traveling abroad on an H-1 or an L-1 or any other non-immigrant visa status really consult with their immigration attorney. There is very much a risk you may not be able to return, they may not be able to return and re-enter the country for some period of time. There's talk of some exceptions for people assisting with COVID-related relief type efforts, but it seemed pretty narrow. And that particular restriction is one the administration believes they can implement unilaterally. So that would not require any rulemaking from their perspective. There will no doubt be litigation, as there has been a lot of litigation in this area. But I do anticipate that one will be put in place in the coming weeks.
I'll make one more comment and then I'll get out of this here. But I think one thing that I mentioned in our pre-talk, one of the biggest concerns with this, there's so many, and Steve, you have an international company, so your voice would probably be even more significantly interesting than mine. The concern that I have is we've been working so hard to increase enrollment in IT for colleges, getting grads, getting workforce, trying to grow them and build them in our country, as well as bring over international students to our educational programs in college, post-secondary, and graduate and stay, because the jobs are growing faster than the graduation rate of U.S. IT workforce. So we've seen over the last several years, as the administration has tightened down immigration, the international enrollment has dropped significantly in the universities in the United States, and many colleges, especially state colleges across the country, heavily depend on that high tuition international percentage of enrollment. So as we look less favorable to the international community, we get less students, which we've been seeing the last few years. So we have less resources. So it just feels like the wrong direction. And I would love to see what we can do to be part of a solution to make sure our universities are what's bubbling up our next level of generation of talent, what we can do to make sure that continues, because otherwise we are a little bit chasing our tail, it feels like.
That's interesting. Sue, I've got a comment from Leon Kappelman, who's with the University of North Texas, a member of the SIM community. He commented on higher ed is very dependent on dorm and food services revenue. And he says foreign student enrollment as well, which is very dependent on extended STEM OPT.
Yeah.
So there is, there's always this maybe sometimes unintended consequences of decisions like this. But I think we've been hearing for years, and I think it was reflected, Mark, in your first where you showed on that graph that we basically supply shut down our ability to grow the employment of IT. And we still have a supply side issue. And I think if I'm hearing from everyone, we're probably still going to have a supply side issue, and we may actually be exacerbating the problem by some of the decisions that we're dealing with.
That was the takeaway that I was trying to make from what Mark was saying, Mark Roberts, was that all of these are constraining to the flow of IT workforce. So if some of them pass, the more the worse it gets. And I wanted to just kind of to remind everyone to overlay that unfortunate negative influence, a constraint, on top of what the earlier graphs were, which showed that although employment has dropped dramatically, IT employment has not, and so there still is that demand, and so the supply side is going to be hurting. We need to understand that, and that also for the non-educated buyer, they might assume that availability means surplus, means lower rates and things like that, which is not the case.
I think Andrew needs a metric that needs to be added to the conversations, number of open positions.
That's interesting. Yeah, you're right. And I haven't had my finger on that data point recently. We have another comment.
The other thing to think about, well, I was going to say, one of the things to think about to help that, just we try to get some solutions in there, is that as employers are looking at positions, if they can look at possibly remote fills for some of those spots, they might have a broader candidate pool than they would if they think traditionally where everyone has to be inside the office.
Yeah, so that's where I was going to go, is the success that we've had with remote productivity and being able to continue that, I think will also be a negative factor for folks coming over, right? Because the fact that we can work remote, they can work remote in India, they can work remote in Manila, anywhere in the country without physically having to be here and be successful, which will reduce the need for on-prem type resources. We do a little bit of H1 transitioning. We don't do a lot of it. Actually, we had one person that we were trying to bring over. Typically, we'll do it for a benefit for that employee. It's a high performing employee. We want to reward them with the opportunity of possibly coming to the United States. We'll use that as a long-term incentive. This person was actually denied, so we were part of that 30% for the one person that I was personally trying to bring over. But I don't know, back to the earlier comment about the potential downturn in IT needs. I still feel the areas around level 1, level 2 will continue to be reduced. I think that skill set is going to continue to be less valuable with the way technology is moving to the cloud and some of the other infrastructure. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity to retool that talent base to other skills. and maybe a supplement for filling some of these other roles. The other thing is, I think this whole pandemic is going to open up a whole bunch of new roles, new innovation, new jobs. I mean, I think that is, maybe I'm just an optimist, but I think that's going to be a tremendous opportunity there as well. So we're going to see a lot. Next 60, 90 days, I think it's going to be very interesting.
I agree with the opportunities that are going to pop up around the corner. I mean, Uber's created like virtual restaurants, haven't they? Where Uber Eats is now jumping into a whole new industry on the other end of their business. But in our college business, we're busy doing safe game days. So there's some gaps in technology that need to be shored up so that if you're fortunate to go to the game, you have your mobile parking pass, mobile ticket, mobile game day program, mobile ordering, mobile food delivery, you know, all these. So there's everybody's experience that is being looked at. There's gaps of technology that can be filled in by whoever's fortunate to seize the opportunity first or second. But it'll be really fun to hopefully be part of some of that.
You're right on, Sue.
Hey, Mark, I just want to make another comment about the H-1B1 situation. So a plus could be if you are a company that has already or has the capability to build up a global insourcing center, with the traditional outsourcing resource folks starting to shed people, you have a good opportunity to pick up that talent in the particular country you might have your GIC operating in.
Yeah. That's we're seeing that as a common trend right now as well.
Actually, I have a follow-up question to that. So what I've heard through the pandemic, certainly in the early days, there were challenges with in many offshore centers in terms of folks working remotely when remote work was required, and certainly we heard a lot about the challenge with international supply chains. Do you think, how do you see that figuring into the calculus?
I think that I think people are already working on unplugging those holes. And, if you have a GIC, that's really something that's within your direct control, as opposed to if I had a third party doing that, then I'd have to follow up and dog the third party to make sure that they were getting their cyber controls in place. But if it's under your control, then I think then you have direct control over how the program works, how the people operate. It's a challenge, I'll admit that, but I know people, at least you can work on it that way.
I think we're seeing a huge increase of companies that were less receptive to remote workers now totally on board. I think the opportunity to staff from anywhere is really now in play. Geographic barriers are now, becoming a non-issue for the most part, except for really, really specific on-prem needs. I think it's opened up huge opportunities in that space.
Yes, Steve, we've got a couple of comments that are, I think, reinforcing that as well, from John Manzanares from Southern Cal, SIM member, and Gene Janowski from Houston, also SIM member. They're both saying they're seeing opportunity in remote workforce, even internationally speaking. There's another interesting comment here from, let's see, it may be Don Landry. Yeah, with many workers stuck in India and not able to work at home there due to a lack of networking infrastructure, and with COVID infections rising rapidly, there are projections that offices there may close or stay closed for a time being. Are you guys seeing any impact from potential closures or just COVID impact on India?
Well, I can speak for Bangalore and New Delhi. Our office has been closed now for a few months. We have some sporadic challenges with connectivity, but for the most part, we've been able to really work through all that. We are probably 99% efficient with one or two resources that are having some challenges. We've had more challenges in Manila, especially on the outskirts that are outside of Metro Manila. A little bit more of issues with connectivity, but for the most part, India, at least those two areas, Bangalore and New Delhi, we've been fine now. I know there's lots of other different pockets and tech centers, but we've seen okay in those two areas.
Well, hats off to their CIO, Steve.
Yeah, wish I could take some of the credit. We did put we implemented some infrastructure enhancements about 6 months ago, so we would call it luck, but we did okay there. So
Good planning, good leadership.
thanks.
Yeah. You know, Leanne Klein has brought up actually a very interesting point here in the Q&A around recruiting universities. Many recruiters recruit out of universities, the large private universities, and she's pointing to the opportunity from the supply side in the public universities. And I want to point out a really good example of this that I'm aware of. Our Southern Cal chapter out of the LA area partners with a couple of groups where they've created this three-sided program, if you will, that provides scholarships, internships, and mentoring for students at the Cal State University system. And the reason that they focus on Cal State is that it's in the market segment that's below UCLA and the major university systems within California. It's focused on many of those that come into university for the first time, their first generation folks coming into it. And the byproduct of that, not only are they expanding the number of access points, but the byproduct is diversity, because they're having a very broad spectrum of diversity that's entering into these schools. And they're actually finding now that some of the larger Accenture and some of the large firms are coming to this program to recruit people. They've had 200 go through in the last 5 years. No, the last 3 years, excuse me. And the result has been that they've actually benefited from a more diverse supply as well. So there's real good point there that Leanne had made. Hey, there's one question that I wanted that was kind of a data point that's really relevant before we move on to the next section of conversation. Marina Perla asks, Mark, do you know if current H4 spouses with EAD will be impacted as well?
Yeah, I think that is a proposal that has been sitting actually at the Office of Management and Budget for quite some time. And it is the intent of the administration to move forward with that. So I think they will. Again, I am not sure on the timing, but there will be an effort to eliminate the EAD status of H4 dependent spouses.
That's great. Interesting, Leanne's giving a shout out. She's actually with the SoCal chapter, so I was shouting about what she was doing. So thank you, Leanne. You guys doing a phenomenal job. All right, so that covers, I think, the questions that were outstanding, Mark, with regard to the details around that. If there's some of these I've missed, we'll certainly try to come back and get them. And I think I may have interrupted some of your data flows for the next area, Mark, around H1B.
I think now it's sort of more open discussion, but I think we sort of nibbled at the edges, and I'm just curious, I kind of showed the period of time where the IT talent was not able to really grow, IT jobs were not able to grow. Is the IT talent crisis over? So was this, I know this is a big question, everyone to look into their crystal ball, but we had this incredible shortage. I mean, it was truly a talent crisis. And now we obviously saw the drop in employment. We're seeing some improvement in some areas, but is the crisis over, or do we still have a problem?
I think you still have a problem, particularly in the area of cybersecurity. I mean, we already had a shortage of qualified cybersecurity folks anyway. I think because of the pandemic and because as we're starting to see business models change from, as Sue mentioned, right, trying to do things more from a mobile app perspective, doing a lot more interaction with their customers virtually. When you do that, that vastly increases the fabric of your potential threat vectors. And since we've gone into the general lockdown across the country, the stats show that ransomware attacks have increased significantly because the bad guys know that with everybody working from home in less secure environments and people being agitated and concerned, that they can phish them really well. And I've actually seen a few companies that I know that have been hit by that. So I think the cybersecurity talent shortage is just going to it's going to be exacerbated because of this.
Yeah,
I agree with Caren. And the other thing you think about is all the number of users, how we've increased the number of IT users out there. So there's just more opportunities, more endpoints.
Yeah, I would agree. Funny you should say that about the security, Caren. Like what we're finding is an uptick on people clicking on phishing attempts and things like that. I think when they're home, they're a little bit more relaxed. They're not in that mindset of being at work and being a little bit more careful. So we've been doing a little bit more quote education on some of these phishing attempts. So
they're clicking from those digital happy hours, Steve. They're all those digital happy hours.
Right.
On the wrong thing.
We call them the martinis, the digital martinis and things like that. I can't say I've ever participated in any of those, but those that know me well probably know I'm lying. But a couple things. One, I think the success of the last few months, IT is, I think, presented a lot of goodwill with the rest of the leadership team, the executive team. Talking among some of my other CIO peers, we're looking at how to leverage that goodwill. What are some new things that we may want to look at from a digital transformation or an optimization side, reinvesting in a few things, really kind of take advantage of a bad situation, but reinvest in IT. So I think the whole area around IT has a lot more opportunities. I think it's going to be interesting to see what skills are going to play out. Security, I think, will continue to be one. But other areas, I think more along the mobile technologies and things like that will continue to have growth opportunities. The other thing that I just in the back of my mind, I've been in this business a long time, was it wasn't that long ago, especially in the academic side, where people didn't want to go into the computer science, the IT majors, and we were doing everything we could to get people because they were hearing the jobs are going offshore, there's no opportunities and all this stuff. So we've made some great headway in turning that around and getting folks interested in going into those disciplines. And now we're spending a lot of time on the diversity side of that as well, getting women and minorities and also. So I don't want to take our foot off that pedal and really articulate any kind of downturn, because I think it's going to be critical, especially with the previous topic in the H-1B. We're going to need folks to stay interested there and keep educating them in that space. So.
I agree with Steve. And I'd like to say is the opportunity is still there for all of our companies. Yes, I believe the opportunity is still there. I think that to kind of piggyback on what everybody's been saying, one thing that we've all learned in this, let's call it staffing business, the workforce drives a lot. Love the people because they really drive it. And a significant workforce in IT appreciates the contract, the beginning end, the new industry, the new technology, the new rate negotiation, what all comes with the lifestyle of a contractor. So we all know we can't discount the impact of the workforce, and I don't think they're ready to change the way they like to work. I think the opportunity, but as far as like shortage of workforce, we're all seeing it. New roles are coming out all the time in areas of security and data and design and whatever you want to call it. And just to keep up with the new specialties that exist, as well as jobs aren't falling off. There's the demand. I don't think we're going to catch up with the demand. I think we still are going to have a problem. I also think companies, somebody might have said this at the beginning. I don't know if it was Andrew or Steve. We're seeing a lot of contract to hire because of the instability of the future. However, they need to still be competitive. They need to get their products to market. They need to shore up their technology. They need to lock systems down. I'm not sure they want to add 20 FTEs in light of what's going on right now. So I do wake up positive, optimistic to maybe I believe the best is yet to come for our industry, but we're riddled with challenges still with a shortage, in my opinion.
So Sue,
we could throw another bit of optimism out there too, if I could. They talked about how the moonshot was what got people interested in technology, in the 70s, 60s. Is this going to be our moonshot? Is this going to be where everyone is interested in video, interested in communicating and technology, and will this get those young people involved and interested? I hope so.
And so, listen, Mark, sorry, did you?
No, we have more questions. Please make your comment, and I'm going to come back to a series of questions.
So I was going to say, I also think that there's two other functional areas that as a result of the pandemic, we're going to start to see growth in. And the first one involves data and data analytics, because I think right now, a lot of companies were getting involved into the whole big data movement to figure out, how to position their products and services. But it's going to be even more important now for companies to figure out how to leverage the data. They've got to predict the impact of future business disruptions and figure out, as they're starting to move towards new business models, how is that actually working with their customers. So I think if you are a professional with data literacy, you are going to be very, very attractive to prospective employers. And the second functional area, as in the public health space, they're now starting to pivot towards contact tracing. The whole issue of privacy and privacy rights is coming up. So I believe if you are also, if you have expertise in governance and compliance, that's going to be big too.
Caren, you answered one of the questions that had come up was around data analysts and data scientist shortage. And I'm glad to hear that because I've got a son-in-law who's a data scientist, so keep them coming.
That's all.
On the another good anecdote here from George Sheath. He goes, he's from the Southern Cal SIM board member and an IT-focused retained search firm owner. He says, we're seeing hiring continuing in hotter industries and some of those that are reopening, but hiring shutdowns or slowdowns in certain sectors like retail. That said, things are looking up in IT overall. CIOs are changing companies at a similar rate from our vantage point. And I can tell you that just from personal relationships and those that I know around the country, there's a shift happening with CIOs, and there's a lot of movement happening in those industries where there's been some restraint or shortfall in their revenue. They're being moved over into other spaces as well. One more here from Donald Landry. If there's a shortage, which I disagree with, why not reinstitute company training centers like we had in the 80s and 90s to teach specific skills to those interested in the profession, to local talented college grads or people transitioning into IT security and other IT professionals? There are many people who left the profession as salaries decreased dramatically. I can tell you that I've certainly seen studies for companies who have looked for some very inventive ways to bring in and reach into other parts of their company to bring people into the technology space and basically elevate them more into the digital side of the economy as some of the other areas of marketing and operations as such. You guys have any thoughts around basically in or seeing any companies internally transition people by reaching out to some of these other segments?
Yeah, Mark, actually, right before all this happened, we were actually talking about doing that. I came from EDS long time ago, so they had a pretty well-established training program. Typically, although they would blend in some computer science folks, a lot of them were non-computer science related fields and things like that, and they had huge success doing that. Our founding owner came from IBM, which had a very similar type of process. Back in the early days of the COBOL shortage, we did something very similar. We retrained a bunch of people. I had 3 people that were on my team at one point. One was a painter, one was I forget some other thing, and converted them to be part of the whole .com craziness. So we talked about implementing something very similar and tapping into that resource pool, both internally as well as externally. I think there's lots of talented folks that don't realize they could be very successful in the IT field.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, especially when it comes to filling the cybersecurity skills gap. I think companies need to fundamentally change the way they approach filling those roles, because right now, if you look at a typical posting, it's requiring a certain degree, it's requiring 1 or more credentials, and I think, and still the roles aren't getting filled because those people aren't there. So to the extent that companies can figure out how to draw from within with their talent, because look at it in terms of characteristics of people and certain other skill sets as opposed to a degree in cyber or certain certifications, then I think the companies would be better positioned.
Interesting.
To the answer of the question of diversity. I mean, it's going to pull in different skill set, different minds, thought process. It just adds to, there's lots of benefits in doing something like that.
Steve Leanne Klein added from Southern Cal. She says, in Southern Cal, we have a lot of women in the California State University system focusing on cybersecurity. People can get talent and more women in their organizations. And she says, feel free to reach out to them if you want to know more. All right, let's see. Is the increase in with work from home just a blip, or is it here to stay? This is a good one. I think everyone will have a comment on. How might that impact supply challenges in IT? And this is from Nirali from the Sunrise Systems. I suppose we've spoken to that a bit, but I think the sense is this remote thing here to stay at a larger level than it was previously?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a bunch of different numbers I've read, I've seen, we've talked internally. I'm planning on at least 25% that will continue to be remote. Probably even a larger percentage that will be part remote, part on-prem. But I think this will continue. I don't know the exact number, but it will definitely be more. We were probably 1% prior to this. And I'm anticipating at least 25% continuing it for at least a longer period of time.
Yeah, no, I would agree, because I think these health concerns are going to be with us for a while, because there's so much that isn't yet known about the virus, and we don't have a vaccine. So I think what you're going to see is a shift where the whole notion and the perception about the virus is going to be moving from I'm just afraid of getting sick to being viewed through the lens of an occupational work hazard. So that puts a different sort of liability worry on a company, and especially as we're trying to resume whatever the next normal is going to be. So like, for example, I've got a team of folks in Phoenix, and we thought we were going to start having limited people go back, but when Phoenix announced that Maricopa County was out of ICU beds and their hospitalization and new case rates are spiking, we're just not going to have anybody go in for the rest of the year at this rate.
Oh, goodness.
I think remote's here to stay. There's also there's the reduced footprint of the office that you can do, so you can save on your budgets that way. There's now this percent of people that know they can be effective remotely. There's managers that are more accepting. They're learning the techniques of managing the remote workers. There's some that can't do it, but I think that people will do it. And as an employer, you'll have a broader reach if a position is remote capable to look at remote possibilities. And I'm suggesting domestic remote as well. But so yes, I think it's here to stay.
It is funny though. Just real quickly, we just did a survey with our group, and just to get a feel for how folks felt about remote, and it was almost split 50-50. 50% were loving it. They love it. They want to continue to do it. 50%, they can't wait to get back to the office. They're tired of being at home. Either the kids are bugging them or whatever. They can't wait to come back. But it was almost right down the middle, 50-50.
That's interesting. I got to say, I am missing the road just a little bit, Steve. I've been stuck at home for 90 days, and I generally spend a lot more time traveling. Hey, Eric Gorham.
There's also parts of it we haven't done yet. There's parts of it that we haven't done yet, and that is bringing on new employees, training them, getting them up to speed, especially entry level. I mean, some of that doesn't lend well to the remote environment, but in time we'll figure those things out.
So Eric Gorham asked some other questions, different types of flexibility around work. As opposed to work from home, what are thoughts on other options? 4 10-hour days, provides employees 3-day weekends, and still provides for needed if they need to get back, kind of a Tuesday, Thursday face-to-face type of arrangement. So longer days, but fewer days sequentially. Are you guys seeing any conversations around that sort of a subject?
I mean, for us, this whole thing is just increased flexibility. We basically promote some sort of core hours, whether it's like 10 to 2, and then allow people to be flexible and things like that. I think that will only continue that trend. But I think this will open up more dialogue and more flexibility for a lot of different other working schedules.
I've heard teams going, we got A team, B team, scheduling a metric around who's in the office and working it out so that they overlap at the correct times. Have your management in on one day for sure, so they overlap. Yeah, that's being done.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Interesting point here. Go ahead, Caren.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, Nurali brought up another great question. Increase in productivity. Generally, across the board, when I've talked with folks, there's been a perceived increase, not just perceived, measured increase in productivity across the board. So, quick raise of hands. Have you guys seen the same or anything different than that? Increase in productivity with remote work? Increase, Andrew? Steve, can you tell?
Some jobs you can, some jobs, when the key is what you said, measured. In some areas you just can't physically measure it. So maybe I'm somewhat skeptic. I think a lot of people are saying they are for many different reasons. Some we can actually attest to that. One of the things we keep talking about is measurement and trying to find a clear way of measuring productivity for all jobs and all roles. But some yes, some I'd say I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we're keeping the lights on, but I can't say well, especially in the first month, I'd say productivity wasn't really there. Even though people were used to working from home, you had all of a sudden, now their significant others were in the house with them. That drove them crazy. The kids were home. They had to homeschool. Some people had family members who had contracted the virus, so that was an added burden. So.
Yeah. So interesting, because a couple of commentaries in the last week that I've heard from those that are in dense population areas where the commutes are an hour and a half or 2 hours a day. They're again anecdotal evidence, but they sense that the jump had very much to do with suddenly you're not in the car for 3 or 4 hours a day, and it gave back to all the workers. Just a lot more bandwidth, a lot more time available. And so the question is it going to sustain? And I don't have a sense about that. I think that what we've gained probably will. And as people get back to having childcare options other than the kids running around in the room behind them, right? That there might be maybe another step up in productivity. But my experience personally with the team that I've been involved in, those that I've talked to, is that overall there has been an uptick, and the sense is it's going to stay. We got questions here. Actually, they're rolling off the screen. They're coming in so fast here, Mark. What about HR issues with work from home issues, lawsuits on work environment? Is there any resistance because of HR standards to maintaining this work at home issue?
Well, I'll hit at that a little bit. You've got to be. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was just going to comment. I like to describe myself. I'm a reformed employment lawyer, and so simple answer is there's always issues. I think folks are trying to figure it out. Obviously, it raises a whole host of new issues in terms of working from home, but so does returning people to the workplace, as Caren had mentioned. In terms of employer liability, things of that nature. So there's kind of a balance. I had an interesting discussion with a major insurance company, and they are very much preparing for certainly increased workers' comp claims. At home, you have different type of potential workers' comp claims, and so you can't control the environment. So definitely a number of issues, and obviously it becomes harder to track certain things and the like. So I think we're going to see some, like everything, we're going to see some new issues emerge as a result of this crisis.
Yeah.
A couple
Mark,
of the basics that everyone should be aware of. I was just going to hit a couple of the basics people should be aware of is when they've got this remote workforce, work with your HR partners, make sure ergonomics, make sure they have the right setup. So at least you've informed them of how to set up a work station with the right metrics, measurements. The second is where the remote worker is working, the state they're in. You gotta be familiar with whatever the laws are there as well. And then the last thing is to really, you have to control, especially when you get into the hourly workers where overtime is an issue, understanding when are they on, when are they off, and make sure that that's clearly defined, because these cases it'll be months, as Mark said. Mark's a former attorney. It'll be months before these things come up, and overtime just can build and build and build. So you really need to work with your HR partner to understand those things. Andrew,
I said reformed attorney, not former attorney. It's
which means he's getting a little better.
I'm not negotiate rental car agreements at this point, but
There you go. Hey, Mark, so we're coming to the end of our time window, and I just wanted to get a final recap from each of you that are here on the team. Just a quick summary of what your key thoughts, takeaways, and what we all be looking at. You know, what should we be paying attention to looking down the road? So, Steve, I'm going to put you on the stand first. Just a quick summary. What are your takeaways?
Well, first of all, it's been an honor to be part of this panel, getting to meet Mark and Sue. I think it's been great dialogue. Even the prep for this I thought was very interesting. I mean, I think we're overall interested in for a very interesting next 30 to 90 days. Lots of things can happen, but I'm also very optimistic. IT's notorious for adapting. We've been here before, and we'll continue to look at ways of figuring a lot of this stuff out and continue to innovate. So it's going to be a huge opportunity for innovation. I just couldn't be more excited about that.
Couldn't agree more there, Steve. Caren.
Yeah, I was going to say, again, thank you for the opportunity to participate, and it was great meeting Mark and Sue as well, and doing this with TechServe Alliance. I think that was a good partnership. I would say definitely keep an eye on the new or those functional areas of technology that are going to start to gain prominence and require more resources as we start to navigate through the series of next normals of this pandemic. And I would agree with Steve. The good thing that's coming out of this pandemic is I think it's really upping the game on innovation. You know, like, for example, all of a sudden, telemedicine has become just quite proficient almost overnight. Yeah. And, you know, I'm starting to see telemedicine with veterinarians as well now, and it's just amazing. But if you're going to be a resilient company, you better up your innovation game.
Whew, isn't that the truth? Andrew Jackson, your final thoughts.
Well, I'm honored to be part of this panel, and I'm also extremely excited that SIM and TechServe Alliance are starting to, you know, work together a little bit. I mean, TechServe is a great organization. They've got great ethics of their members, ongoing education. It's a great group. And then also in starting up all the SIM chapters I've done, having staffing partners make good members of SIM, and it's a good sponsorship community as well. And of course, SIM and the ongoing education through SIM and the give back that SIM gives to the industry is huge. So I'm glad the two organizations are touching. I look forward to more interaction between the two. In regards to today and the conversation, there's so many things, but you know, I guess the biggest one that kind of hits on me is that the idea of the workforce, the remote workforce, is here to stay. How do you manage it? How do you leverage it to make it most effective? Not everything fits remote, I understand that, but what does? I think that the CIO that was remote ready, they're the ones, as Steve said, that have been elevated through this, but that'll change. You know, we've got to keep going forward. So innovating, working on the omnipresence. There's a lot of exciting things going forward. So I'm glad to be in the IT industry.
Yeah, me too. Well, Mark Roberts, thank you for being the host for all this and helping bring us together. We have a number of really intriguing comments and questions that we were not able to get to. So clearly we hit on an interesting vein that resonated with our extended community. I want to close with just my thanks again, Mark, for helping bring us together. You've been a friend to me since Andrew introduced us a year ago, and certainly looking forward to more that we do together in this endeavor.
We are as well, and I just want to thank all our panelists. Great to meet Steve and Caren, and Andrew, thank you again for your role. Just my closing thoughts, just really bullish on, I think, the future. Every disruption presents opportunities, I think, and if you look through every downturn, IT has always come out higher, you know, after the decline. So I see no reason why we will not continue to grow as an industry. So very, very looking forward to the future.
Outstanding. Thanks again to everyone. Have a great day. For all those who participate in your questions, I'm deeply grateful. You really made it an interesting, intriguing for those of us on the panel, and we'll do it again. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.